You're listening to The Insider, the official podcast for the City of Murfreesboro. I'm Mike Browning. We welcome you to this podcast, and our guest today is Alan Farley. He's the County Administrator of Elections, and what a unique time here. We've got a lot going on with elections, and this is the time where you're probably the busiest, Alan.
It's very busy, but it's exciting time.
Let me get a background so people understand. You've been in this position a while. How long have you been doing this?
10 years. In 2014 is when I first became the administrator. I had served as a election commissioner for a better part of the 1990s and early 2000s.
So you've seen a lot just in the 10 years. What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now?
Well, the biggest thing is, of course, the growth, making sure that we stay abreast of that, making sure that we provide services for the voting public. And so making sure that from an election integrity, security standpoint, making sure that we are staying two or three steps ahead of that process. Those are the biggest challenges that we face.
When you refer to election integrity, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, the chain of custody of the ballot, security of our facilities, security of the machines, making sure that our database, our voter database is secure, is current. So making sure that our voter rolls are clean as we possibly can, for as much growth that we've had. There's so many people that move in, move out, so making sure that we stay abreast of that. So that's really what I mean when I say election integrity.
I saw something that people who live in Tennessee will be very fascinated by. We're apparently number one in that issue in the nation?
Yes, based out of all 50 states for the last 3 consecutive years. And this is something that I know all my counterparts across the state, all 95 counties, is something we're very proud of, is that Tennessee has been ranked 3 consecutive years as number 1 in the nation in election integrity. And that's based off of the way we conduct our elections and also the laws that are on the books.
Now, if you're an independent observer of things, or unbiased, let's say, not that anyone can be unbiased completely, you probably look at that in a really positive way, that's something that we know it's going to be as close to being truthful and professional as can possibly be.
It is. I mean, because you're looking at every aspect. You're looking at the absentee by mail voting process, you're looking at the early voting process, you're looking at the election day process. So, and the security of that, the availability. We like to say, and this comes from the Secretary of State's office, in Tennessee, it's easy to vote, but hard to cheat.
And the early voting process, some people might question that. How can we know that that's a reliable process?
Well, number one, that's how I cast my vote. And some people say, well, don't vote early because, well, they don't count those votes. Well, I guarantee you they get counted because, number one, that's what we're supposed to do. But also, I cast my vote early, so I'm going to always make sure that I don't always win my vote, but I always want to make sure my vote counts. So my voice is heard. So, yeah, so the early voting process is really, it started in 1994. It's hard to believe that, that's been around, been around for 30 years. And so a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand the election day because all they've ever known is the early voting process. So, your traditional voters, they still want to go election day. But the early voting process gives you a lot of flexibility, especially based off of your schedule and time. But it's very secure and very popular. 83% of our people in the 2020 presidential election voted early. 83%.
For someone like you, early voting is probably a good thing because you don't pile it all into one day, but you do have people who have to work those days, so there's the administration of it, but it's probably better to stretch it out a little bit. Is that right?
From an administrative standpoint, yes. I mean, I think we'll vote probably, I know you want to get into this a little later, we'll probably vote 160 to 165,000 people. And it would be almost impossible to vote that many people in one day.
Long lines.
Long lines because there's only so many locations that people are willing to offer their location for a polling location. Of course, schools is something that places we like to use, but just the fact of to be able to do it in a timely manner, what I call error-free. I have a job, we have to be 100% right 100% of the time. And so it's very important that we can make sure and do that administratively as flawless as we can, and early voting gives us that opportunity.
So when we talk about early voting, when is it?
October 16th is the first day, and it will close on the night of Halloween, October the 31st. So,
But you do have it on Halloween.
yes, we
Early
will.
voting.
Yes, we will.
And that's typically, for example, your main office has it, right?
Right. Our office on the square, which is 1 South Public Square, Suite 103. I always say it's across from the courthouse, next to Big Cleaners. But it's open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, from the 16th through the 31st. And on Saturday, it will be open from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. And so, and then we have 8 other satellite locations throughout the county. In the city of Murfreesboro, we have SportsCom, which is a Murfreesboro facility. Our Parks and Recs folks are great partners, and we really appreciate what Bart Fight and his staff really do out there. They're very accommodating. But that location is open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 to 2 on Saturday. And then we have our election annex, which is on 426 East Vine Street, is also open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 8 to 2 on Saturday. And then also we have the Middle Tennessee Association of Realtors out on Butler Drive, which covers the southern part of our city. And so they're right across from Pillsbury. So they're open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 to 2 on Saturday. And then we've got World Outreach Church Leadership Park there on the corner of New Salem and Barfield Road. They're also open 9 to 6, 8 to 2 on Saturday. And then we have 2 locations, don't make me forget Lane Agri Park.
Right.
Because that's a big location for the west side. So Lane Agri Park is a location there on John Rice Boulevard. And then we've got 2 in Smyrna and 1 in Laverne.
And I assume there's signage for
Yes.
those as well?
Yes, there is.
What kind of turnout are you expecting in comparison to other elections?
You know, the sad thing is that presidential turns out far greater than local.
Right.
Of course, local impact, and I could go on an hour of.
We don't get near enough
Right.
voters on
Correct.
local elections.
But for presidential, we'll see. I'm projecting around 72%, which
That's pretty high.
It
Because
is.
it wasn't like 76% nationwide during like the Kennedy-Nixon election was one of the highest elections nationwide.
Yeah, I
So
mean-
anywhere in the 70s
Right,
is good.
and I think we're always around 68 to 70% here for the presidential, and so I think our county election just recently was only 10% turnout. So we'll see far greater, which I think we'll vote between 160 and 165,000 people.
That means we're very engaged, at least on the national level.
Exactly.
So that's good that we have people who are wanting to have their voice heard, because that's what democracy is all about, right?
Exactly right.
The other thing is when people do go to vote, they've already registered and the registration deadline passed October 7th. They have to have an ID. You have to have verification. That's part of this integrity.
That is. It's in Tennessee, you have to have a Tennessee state-issued photo ID, whether it be a driver's license, a gun permit, any type of it may not have a driver's license, but it may be a form of identification that you
A passport is good too,
that's a federal
but it's still good in
document.
Tennessee or
Yes,
not?
yes. So you can have a state issued or a federal, which you can have a military ID, you can have a passport, a form of ID from TSA. It's a federal issued, so it can be a federal issue, a photo ID, or a state issued federal ID from the state
Of course,
of Tennessee.
we want everybody to bring their ID when they come, but sometimes people just forget. And if they do, is there a provision? I think there is a provision for that.
Yes, what will happen is they can still cast a vote. They will cast a provisional vote on paper, and then they will have 2 business days to come back by our office to bring that photo ID. Some people have moved, they've changed their registration, but they have not changed their driver's license. So that gives them an opportunity to go to our driver's license center and go ahead and get their new ID and come back and present that. Or if they forgot it, they can, go back home next day, bring it by the office, and their vote counts.
That raises for me an administrative question. So when someone does that, you've got to keep track of that in some way. Let's say they don't come back. You must have some method of making sure that vote isn't counted.
Correct. I mean, all of the provisional votes are actually set aside in a secured box. And then at that point in time, when the person does come, then we're able to access the box and pull that ballot and go ahead and count it. And of course, when that 48 hours of those 2 business days expire, then those ballots, the sad part is, they don't get counted. I mean, they went to the trouble, but some people just, they won't go that extra step of bringing their photo ID.
And then it doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
We've talked about how, we're number one in integrity. What makes Tennessee so unique?
Well, one thing I like about in Tennessee, now keep in mind, these election laws, there's been some minor changes over the last few years, but these election laws we have on the books, the biggest majority of them, they've elected supermajorities of both political parties. So some people say, well, the state laws are passed to drive voter turnout for one way or the other. That's not true because, supermajorities of both political parties have been elected under these many of these state election laws.
In other words, at one point, Tennessee was mostly Democrat.
Yes.
And now it's virtually all Republican in the House and governor. So different parties have been elected and then passed these laws.
Well, a lot of the laws that we have on the books are from the 70s and 80s.
Right.
Which at that point in time had elected supermajorities of the Democratic
Of the Democrats,
Party.
right.
And then also the same election laws that we have today. Of course, time changes, technology changes, so there are some new laws that have been passed. But for pretty much the grand scheme of things, they have elected supermajorities of both. But one thing I like about Tennessee, which not only makes Tennessee unique, but also makes Rutherford County unique, is that I had the opportunity back in 2016 to get legislation passed for Rutherford County to become a convenient vote center county, which means on election day, you can go to any location and vote versus an assigned precinct. And so that was to help drive voter turnout. That was also, a lot of times people who commute back and forth to Nashville, they live here in Murfreesboro or in the eastern part of the county. And of course, if you got to be in downtown Nashville at 7:30, you got to leave at 5:30. So polls don't open at 7. So this new legislation allowed us, when you're driving back from Nashville, you can stop in Smyrna, Laverne at a polling location and vote. Or if you live in Eagleville but you work in Laverne, in Interchase City or something like that, you can vote at lunchtime in Laverne. You don't have to wait to come back by to Eagleville and miss that opportunity to get there by 7 o'clock.
I think you and I would generally agree that convenience is a good thing. For elections. But there are some people out there who are vocal about how you don't want to make it too easy.
Well, the voter has some. We need to always make sure the voter has some responsibility, for the simple fact of because it's kind of like everybody needs to have, whether it's voting or whatever, need to have some skin in the game. So there needs to be some people like, will we ever go to voting on our phones? Will we ever go to where we can just dial it in? No, people need to appear in person. And I think one thing you'll see back during the 2020 pandemic, we had 83% of our people voted early, but out of 144,000 people that voted, only 9,500 and some voted by mail. Even during the people want to show up in person to cast their vote, and so I think that's very important. But you want to make it to where you don't have to drive by. I can remember back at a time, people that lived in they would drive by Mitchell Nilsson because they would have to drive to Central Magnet School because that's where their voting location was. Because there's always a line. Somebody has to be on one side of the line, and so the dividing line. So, you have to drive by your nearest location because, well, I'm lumped. We don't have that anymore.
We can go to any polling place.
Go to any, looks like early vote. So really what it is, it allows, it's like early voting on election day. You can go any of the locations and you can cast
I think
your
that's a
ballot.
great idea, and you implemented that, and it's really paid off, I'm
Right,
sure, in
and
terms of
there's 6
outcome.
other counties in the state who have followed our lead. So we were able to develop that process, and so, and it's one of those things, the people love it here.
Do you ever think we'll get to the point where Election Day will be a holiday?
People ask me that question a lot, and I don't know, because that would be something that would have to be done at the federal level. It's been discussed, so I mean,
And would it make that much of a difference? People still wouldn't vote even if they had the day off, right?
well,
it would make some.
it's hard to say. Some people think, and this is kind of a myth that's out there. Well, if you register to vote, well, you get called for jury duty. Well, that's been done away with years and years ago.
So that's not where they get the
That's
pool.
not where they get. That's where they don't get the list to pull for jury duty from the voter files. But there's a lot of people who believe that. But then you have some people that they register, but they just don't bother to show up.
Yeah.
And I've never
Some
never
of it's
understood
status
that.
quo. They feel like either comfortable the way things are, or they don't think it counts, right?
Right, and because I can remember when I turned 18 years of age here I came to the courthouse and signed up for selective service and registered to vote the same day, and I've never missed an election. Even the old referendum that the city had back on the ability to build the conference center, there was only one question, and it was an odd day, wasn't a normal election. I have voted every single election, but and there's some people that are like that, but then there's some that, well, they'll vote and they may vote 4 years, 6 years later, but some we never see again.
What kind of issues are you anticipating? Are you really looking forward so you can make sure you solve them or prevent them from happening?
Well, we've got a great team, and I'll put them up against anybody in the state or in the country. And so we work really hard. We always look at each election and think, okay, what can we do to improve for the upcoming election? So it's one of those things. It's not like we're just sitting back going, hey, we've got this thing, let's just wait for the election day to show up. We're always working to make those improvements, and our election commissioners are always looking for that as well. And so I really don't anticipate any problems. If a large number of people show up at the same time at 5:15 election night, there could be some lines, but we always try to make sure that I'm not a patient person, so I don't like lines myself. So we try to make sure that we move people as quickly as possible through our process. So that might be the only thing that I see that there could be a problem, but it'd be people showing up at the same time right after work or right before work.
And then having to process
and
those.
having to wait.
In some states, there's been talk of a concern or worry about like intimidation. I don't think we've ever had much of that here in Tennessee, but if there was some intimidation going on or thought of it, what is the process for that? I mean, you immediately call law enforcement, or what do you do?
Well, from a security standpoint, our polling locations are secure. If there's some issue of any disturbance, and sometimes that has happened in the past over the last 20 years that I've been involved with this process, and you just call the local law enforcement and let them handle it. But we've not experienced those problems in 2020 and 2016. I actually testified before the United States Senate on this specific subject, and of course the Secretary of State of Arizona, Secretary of State of Pennsylvania that were there and testified at the same time I did. They faced a whole lot of different situations, or their people did, than we did here in Tennessee. So But I feel very strong that I know what's best for Rutherford County. I've lived here all my life. I know our people and know our residents. And if there's an issue, we talk with local law enforcement, Murfreesboro Police Department and Sheriff's Department, and say, hey, this is our polling locations. If there's any disturbances, we're going to call you. And in my time, we've never been faced with that.
We have some people that live in foreign countries, but they still want to vote. We have people who can't get to the polls, that kind of thing. You have an absentee balloting process. What is that process?
Well, in Tennessee, and this is something that I really feel strong about, and one of the reasons why we are ranked number one. I mean, a voter has to request an absentee ballot. They're just not at random sent out to voters. Mm-hmm. And I can't go out here and just start soliciting absentee voters, or even if I was a candidate, soliciting absentee voters.
They have to do that by mail with an application or something.
Right. They can. The voter has to make that request to us in writing, stating the fact or reason why they want to vote by mail, and also it has to be under their signature. And so there's a signature verification process that we go ahead and we look at and process that request, but we verify their signature.
From past voting,
and also from their voter registration.
Okay.
And then, there's sometimes, it's very evident that that's not the person's signature. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have rejected those. Now, sometimes my voter registration signature and my signature today, they don't match. But the way you sign your name, there's similarities. So
there is a process for that.
There's a process. There's training that our folks, that myself and my staff go through. But you have to have that signature verification, and then we'll mail the ballot to the voter. Then at that point in time, they vote their ballot, and then there's an affidavit on the absentee ballot envelope that they mail back to us.
So you're doing it by oath?
And yes, by oath, and then they have to sign that. Then we verify that signature on that affidavit at the time when we get the ballot back. And then
so if you're registered, you have until October 29th to still do that, if you're in that situation.
Correct.
To make the application.
To make the application.
So let's say you make the application, and by October 29th you get approved for that, then you can still vote by November 5th. Because
Correct.
you've already gotten the approval to do it that way.
Right, but in Tennessee, you have to vote by mail. So the concern.
Oh, it has to be in by November.
Yeah, so it has to be into our office by the close of polls election night, which was 7 p.m. on November 5th. So I tell people all the time, in Tennessee, you can request 90 days prior. So there's 3 months from election day. And some people religiously, that request comes in, it's within a couple of days, it's on the 88th day. So they've mailed it on the 90th, and we get it. And of course, some people wait till the 8th or the next to last or last day. And the sad part is, a lot of those people, they're wanting you to mail them a ballot in California, Arizona, Nevada, Washington. There's no way that
it's like registration. You missed the deadline. Right?
Well, they get it to us, but by the time we get it processed, which our policy is here, day in, day out. If the request comes in that day, we get that ballot mailed out that afternoon. Because that allows us to stay on top of making sure that we just don't get a snowball on us.
But you still have to get it back by November 5th.
Correct.
Because that's your counting day.
Correct.
And if you don't have it by then that became an issue one other time. I can't remember which election, but somehow the military ballots, maybe from Iraq or somewhere, did not come in on time. Not necessarily here, but somewhere. Do you remember hearing about that?
I'm not familiar with that.
At least that was the issue. I think it got resolved
right,
eventually.
But we have ballots all the time that they come post-election, but you look at the postmark date on them, and it's election day or it's the day after election day, but they still send them back in. But we don't; those ballots don't get counted. So I always encourage people that if you know that you're going to be out of town, or if you're, we have used to. I don't know. I hadn't seen them a lot this time, but in Canton, Mississippi, there was a lot of Nissan people that would go down there and work periods of time. Well, that's where their temporary address is. So they knew, I'm not going to be here come November, so I'm going to be. So they would go ahead and they would mail for an absentee ballot, and I'd tell them 90 days out, go ahead and send us that, so that way when the ballot is approved and we're ready to go, you can get your ballot 2 months beforehand, and then you get it sent back. There's no issue with coming up against that deadline. And so I tell people all the time, make sure get your ballot request in as quickly as possible. Because that allows time for us to get it processed, for the post office to deliver the ballot, for you to vote the ballot, and for the ballot to get back to us.
How many registered voters do we have?
Well, it's of course the day the taping of this is our last day. Mm-hmm. As of right now, we have 223,600 voters, which I think that we're going to finish up over 224,000. If not close to 225,000 for the November
And with
election.
growth, that's probably the highest we've ever had.
It's the most we've ever had, yes.
That's a lot.
It really is.
Now, the question is, you're saying about 70-some% of those you expect to cast a ballot of those 224. So not all of those will cast a ballot, even though they're registered.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll see 160, 165 total. The most we've ever voted before was in 2020. Was right at 144,744 to be exact.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about the growth and the impact it's having. So how many extra polling places have you had to add, or did you have to add any since the last time you had a presidential election?
Well, we've added two on the west side of the city or the county, because that's where a lot of our growth back off from the 2020 census, where we saw a lot of growth. But that's a great thing about the convenience centers, is that it allows you to not have to add or move. Each election that that these locations they're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And with redistricting, reapportionment, your lines changed, so your precincts had to change, your voting locations had to change. So some people would show up at the wrong location because in the past they had to vote at Mitchell-Nilson. Well, now they're not at Mitchell-Nilson, they're at they will be somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Well, you show up at 6:45, you don't have time to get. You now under the new system, you never go to the wrong place.
And that can be frustrating if you stood in line the whole time and got up there and then realized you're in the wrong place.
So the great thing about that is we have 30 polling locations throughout the county, and so and so those 30 are locked in. We have them each election. And so if need be, we can add additional machines, additional registrars, staffing based off the turnout that we're expecting.
For these polling places, how many employees do you need to have?
Well,
workers?
we actually, 350 to 400 people are who we have kind of staffing our polling locations. And I would love to be able to take credit to, hey, I can make these election days go smoothly. But it is our people that are in our community that make it work. They're the ones who conduct our elections. We put it in place, and we kind of set the standard. But it's the people that it's your next door neighbor, the people you go to church with, go to school with, and the kids, the PTA involved. Our community, that's the one who conducts our elections. So, without those individuals, and we have some folks that are just they're rock stars.
And if someone's civic minded, how do they go through that process to become one?
They can contact our office at 615-898-7743. We'd be more than happy to go ahead and get them in a training session and getting them trained and getting them to work. Also, too, they can go to our website, which is at www.ruco.vote. Go to poll worker link there, and there's an application. They can fill that out, and we'll get in touch with them. We're always looking for people, because life gets in the way, and sometimes they can work one election, but there's a vacation or there's an illness or whatever, so they're not able to work every election. So we're always looking to backfill in those spots. So we'd love for anybody to participate.
As we wrap it up, let's talk about the end game. You have to have a paper trail for all of this. which I can't imagine, trying to make sure that every ballot is counted right, and like you said, that perfection. The certification process, what is that like? What do you have to go through?
Well, we always do a post-election audit. And of course, now, one of the things that's new for Rutherford County is in March, if any of our viewers have voted in March or August, they have voted on our new machine. And so the machine is when you push the button and you want to vote for Joe Pearl, beforehand, it just, you base it off, okay, that's what the screen told me. Now you have a way to confirm your ballot. So when you look over and you're through voting and you hit confirm, then there's a paper component on your machine. It lists the office and the name of each person that you voted for. And if that's correct, you go ahead and hit cast vote, and then it scrolls up, and it's behind a plexiglass screen. So that gives us a verified paper audit trail. So with that, if there's an issue, we can go back. Of course, we at random pull machines and say, okay, we're going to count our vote counters. Okay, well, Joe Pearl should have 100 votes. Okay, because that's what the tally card says. That's what the tally tape says. So now we go through and we count by hand.
And there must be some kind of number on each one
Yes.
to associate it.
Yes. So that way, if you want to pick machine, 153, and then you pull that and say, okay, we're going to randomly pull that one, and where it was assigned, we have 100. We have 300 votes cast. We have 300 ballot applications. So everything has to balance out. So when we go through the certification process, and in 2020 we had 144,744 votes cast. Well, we had 144,744 ballot applications. And so at that point, we balanced. We didn't have more voters than we had ballot applications, or we didn't have ballot applications more than we had voters. So when you go through that process and you cross-check with that paper audit trail, so then at that point, we have our certified number. So election night is always unofficial because you do have provisional votes that we talked about. So once we go through that process, and in 2020, we had about 700 and some odd provisional votes that were cast. Of that 700 plus provisional votes that were cast, only 177, I believe, counted. So you do have that number, which is added to your unofficial.
Was that because of signatures or didn't meet the deadline? Or
They forgot their photo ID, or they went to the Department of Safety when they got their new driver's license and they wanted to register, but there was a disconnect from the Department of Safety for us getting that registration.
Got it.
So the voter did everything that they were supposed to do, but the process didn't work. So we go back and the safety sends us that application, and we see that Susie Jones marked, yes, I want to register to vote. She did what she was supposed to do. We have that documentation. We didn't get that registration. So at that point, she appears to vote in person, but she's had to vote provisionally. So now that ballot counts. But, in 2020, we had a truck driver from Alabama stop in, said, hey, I want to vote. And, we tell him, I can vote you provisionally, but it will not count because you're not a resident and you're not a registered voter here. And his response was, I don't care. I want to vote. Okay, yeah. Well, you'll get the vote, but I'm just telling you, it will not count. So there are some people, that the situation happens, or they register in another county, they move here, they don't change their registration, and so they think that, well,
I was registered in that county, so why aren't I
can just show up here and vote. So sometimes that happens, or sometimes people think they voted, but they actually they didn't. So but the cumulative of all that post-election audit comes up, and then we certify by state law. We have to certify the third Monday after each election. And so what we will do is we'll come together with all of their information from our audit, and then present our findings to the election commission or commissioners, and then they will vote to certify that election.
Well, Alan, thanks a lot for being our guest.
I appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity because we always want to make sure people get their source of information from reliable sources. And so I tell people all the time, go to the Secretary of State's website or go to our website to get information because that'll be the most accurate.
All right. Good luck with the process.
Thank you.
Our guest has been the election administrator for Rutherford County. The website for Rutherford County Election Commission and Administration is ruco.vote, where you can see a sample ballot. The number to call is 615-898-7743. We've been highlighting issues with the Election Commission here in Rutherford County. For more information on the City of Murfreesboro, it's www.murfreesborotn.gov. This has been The Insider. I'm Mike Browning. Thanks for joining us.